Likutei Sichos, Chelik Yudalit, that's volume 14, the third Sicha for Parshas Nitzavim. This Sicha is not that long, and we'll attempt to learn it inside as much as possible. In the original text. This is a Rashi Sicha. However, it's not one of those common Rashi Sichas that go back and forth on the detail, asking questions, answering, and then coming to a conclusion. Rather, this is more of a Sicha that bases the facts on what Rashi does not say, and derives from that what he doesn't say is because it's so obvious and it's so logical, and the Rebbe gives us a very, very interesting explanation, and also the promise in the fact that every Yid gets the blessing from Hashem. Let's begin. On the pasuk v'hoyo ki yavoyu elecha kol advarim ha'ela habrocha v'haklala. Hashem says, Moshe Rabbeinu says, it shall come to pass, when all these things come upon you, both the blessing and the curse, v'hashivoysa el vavecha, you will take to heart, b'chol hagoyim asher yidichecha Hashem shama, amongst all the nations that Hashem banished you there, v'shavta ad Hashem elekecha, you will return to Hashem your God, Gomer, etc., b'chol levavcha u'b'chol nafshecha, with all your heart and with all your soul. V'hinei, b'hemshech haparsha muvan, from the content of the parsha, it's understood, and the hemshech, and the continuation of the parsha, it's understood, shahamechuvan b'psukim hu, that what is the objective in all these psukim, shebesayfei shel davar, that at the end of everything, yashuv kol echad b'bnei Yisrael b'shuva shleima laHashem, that every single yid will return with a complete shuva to Hashem. Hainu, meaning, shegam misha over al darchei Hashem v'chulu, that even somebody who perhaps transgressed and went away from the ways of Hashem, etc., hinei al yidei zeh sheyavoyu olav kol hadvarim ha'ela gomer haklala, that through this, that everything will come upon him, quote, all these things, ending with the curse, end of quote, yisayder lahashiv eliboy, this will awaken him to take to heart what's happening ad sheyagia, until he will reach the point of le quote v'shavta ad Hashem elekecha, to the point of returning to Hashem's God. Omnom, however, lefi zeh tzarich lahavin, according to this, we need to understand ma shekasav, what it's written here in the pasuk, the original pasuk we quoted, v'hayu ki yavoyu elecha v'goymer habracha, that Moshe says to them, it shall come to pass, it shall be, when all these things come upon you. What are those things? He doesn't only say the curse, he also says first the blessing. And the Rebbe explains the question. It would work out well if you say something which is the opposite of good, who comes upon them, who goyrem l'shviras halev. This causes the breaking, the crushing of the heart of the person's spirit. Umuvan, it's understood shezehu siba l'seiras tshuva, that this is a reason, this is a cause, this is a catalyst to get somebody to be awakened with tshuva. Avol, however, how does one become awakened, become aroused to do tshuva? Through getting the blessings. In other words, how do blessings lead one to do tshuva? And now, since this is also a question, which is a question according to Pshutei Shemikra, when we learn the basic pshat in the pasuk, so here is even another question. Not only the general question, how does a bracha bring one to do tshuva, but another question, Madua ein shum remez lekush yezu v'yeshuva b'pirush Rashi. Why is there absolutely no question, no hint even, not only no question, no hint of any question and any answer on this question, any explanation in Rashi? She'inyan eliyashiv u'levayer as kol davar hakosher v'adarush bira b'shut shemicha. The Rashi's thing is to explain and to clarify anything, everything and anything that requires a better explanation, a better clarification according to Pshut Shemikra. Therefore, this leads us to a conclusion. Therefore, you must say that this itself is proof. The fact that Rashi doesn't say anything, that in itself is proof Shelefi pshutei shemikra, that according to pshutei shemikra, ein makom l'kushas u'mikara. There's no question at all, even to begin with. There's no question. V'hine. For sure, we cannot explain that these psukim, are speaking about the future. Divrei Hasidus means, a prediction or a prophecy for the future. B'derech nevuah, in a matter of prophecy. We cannot suggest that. Me'hamayrois Hasidim lavai alam Yisrael. From all the events that are going to happen on the Yidden, and that therefore one would maybe perhaps suggest that this is the reason why it says bracha, because it's not telling you this will happen if this is not done or if you don't go in Hashem's way. Rather, it's just telling us what the future holds. That Moshe is telling them, listen, there will be blessing, there will be curses. You cannot say that. Okay? Because the truth is, Kikein Yiyah. In truth, this will be. The first will come the blessings, v'hoya, and it actually was, as we already know. In hindsight, we know the history of the Yidden as they arrived in Eretz Yisrael and so on. B'seida hamaroi shebnei Yisrael b'vayim la'aretz. In the order of the events that happened to the Yidden as they came to Eretz Yisrael. The hayamim arishonim, that the early days, yimei bracha v'toiv levnei Yisrael, will be days of blessing and good for the Yidden. Ula'achazman, and after time, kishayechtu, when they're going to sin, yavay aleim hepech hatoiv, then will fall upon them, chas v'shalom, the opposite of good. You cannot argue that this is what the objective of these psukim are. Why? Aleph, number one, Sipur Hasidus b'alahalim parshas Vayelech. Any talk about the future, about Moshe telling the Yidden what the future holds, the prophecy, the prediction of the future, that's in the next parsha, in Parshas Vayelech. That's number one. And number two, in those very psukim. Further on, meaning there in Parshas Vayelech, in which that is the actual place in where the future is discussed and is being related to the Jews. There is actually no mention of the blessing and the good. There Moshe says, listen, I know you're going to sin one day. I know you're going to, corrupt your ways. And I know that bad is going to befall upon you. So that cannot be the argument here. In other words, here it cannot be talking about the future, because if it is, then why is it mentioned blessing here and not there? Uvichlal, and I would say this is like the third, so to speak, the third answer to shoot down, to smack down this attempt of an answer that is speaking about the future. Uvichlal, and besides, hasvara nesenes shekabolas hatoiv ba'asid einay dover haba v'nemel mafreya b'derech nevuah. Logic, rationale gives that the good that will come in the future, and the Rebbe underscores the word future, is not something that's retroactively discussed, meaning it's not told in advance that the good will come. Why not? V'hatam, and the reason, because this is something which is contingent on a person's bechira, on a person's choice. Ukemifurish b'seif parshasenu, like it's explained in the end of the parsha, that Hashem says, see, Moshe says, see, I gave before you the good, the bad, I gave before you life, and you should choose life. And so too, likewise, in the beginning of Parshas Re'eh, where over there it says, see, I put before you the good and the bad, and the Rebbe puts in the parentheses, Shehatalmid lomdoi kvar, the student means the legendary student of the Pshutei Shel Mikra. He already had learned it, that what? It says there, quote, Es habrocha asher tishmu, that the blessing will come when or because you listen to Hashem. V'haklola, and God forbid the curse, im lo yisishmu, if you don't listen to Hashem. So you can't say that the blessing is something that can be predicted in advance or prophesied about in advance. Why? Because the bracha, the blessing, is contingent on how the people will behave and how they will choose, if they will choose to receive the bracha by means of doing the right thing. Moreover, in Parshas Vayelech itself, what does Moshe tell the Yidden? What does he tell them? He says, I know that you guys are all rebels. And he finishes off there saying that I know that you're going to corrupt your ways and you're going to do what's wrong. And then bad's going to befall upon you. And that's why this actually is why Moshe says he is so certain that the people will stand up and go against Hashem. So you can't say that this is a means of prophecy. And according to all this, according to all these questions we just stated, it's understood in our matter that it's not the objective of the psukim to tell us what the future holds. Ella, rather, what are the psukim telling us? That they come to actually to serve as testimony, and to announce to them, to tell the Yidden, to make it known to them, shebe'im, and the Rebbe stresses the word be'im, if lo yelchu b'nei Yisrael, if the Yidden will not go by their own bad choice, b'darche Hashem, in the ways of Hashem, v'asher b'glal zeh yavoy aleim hadvarim alei toivim, and that which, because of which will chas v'sholom come upon them the very not good things, through this itself, through the fact that the bad things will come upon them, they're going to awaken to come and do full tshuva to Hashem. So the Rebbe basically concludes that we can't say this is a prophecy of the future. Rather, really, it's a warning. It's telling them, listen, if you're not going to go in Hashem's way, then the klala will come upon you. And chas v'sholem, it's going to be so bad, that it's going to be so crushing, that you are going to be awakened to do tshuva. You're going to be humbled and you're going to do tshuva. Avo, im kain, if so, hadra kusha hana leduchta. The above mentioned question, it's an expression, it's a Talmudical expression. It goes back to its place. That means the question is right back to where we began. Ma inyana shel habracha li'is'oiris tshuva. What exactly is the role of blessing in the awakening of tshuva? Again, we made the point before, and it's quite obvious, that chas v'sholom, when a person suffers pain, it breaks the ego, it breaks the person's arrogance and his mode of rebellion, and it brings him to do tshuva. But where does the bracha play a role in doing tshuva? Chapter 2, Vahabir, and here's the explanation. The Parsha Zu Mevayer, in this Parsha he explains, Kanitzke Liel, as we mentioned above, the Heregesh Atzar M'Haklola Hi Sheta'oireres Achoite Loshuv B'Tshuva, that the feeling of pain that comes through the curse is what will wake up the person, will arouse the person to do tshuva, to return to Hashem. Ukfi Shemesayim HaKosuf, and like the pasuk concludes, not just any tshuva, but listshuva nailis kazu, to such an elevated level of tshuva, shehi, that this tshuva is, quote, b'chol levavcha b'chol nafshcha, with your whole heart and with your whole soul. V'haseichul haposhut mechayev. And the Rebbe says basic common rationale dictates shekeshem she'atshuva hi be'oifen naila b'yesed, that just like the tshuva is such a high elevated level, ad shechaderes toich pnimis levav v'nafshei, to the point that it actually permeates his entire heart and soul. Therefore also the cause for the tshuva is also one that is a very, very deep cause. In other words, it's not just a curse, but it's a curse that really, really affects the person on a very deep level. Hergesh atzar shel haklola. The feeling of pain of the curse. The hainu, what does this mean? Shegam hagoshes atzar. That also, what does this mean? That the feeling of the pain, hu ba'oifen hamachiv b'yoser, is in a matter that really hurts the most, so much, yoser b'pfei haragil, even more than the norm. It doesn't matter what kind of curse, but it's such a curse that it hits the person in the deepest spot. And this is where the pasuk explains exactly how this will happen, chas v'sholom, if the Yidden do not follow in the ways of Hashem. And that's where the pasuk comes to say, Ki yavoyu alecha kol hadvarim ha'ele habrocha v'akola. The Rebbe stresses the word kol. When all of this, in other words, not just the curse will come upon you, but the Torah is telling you when the curse comes, it's going to be a package. It's like a package deal, a negative one, of first the blessings and then the curses. V'hamuvam bazeh. What is the idea here? What is the sense? Shekol divrei haklola, that all the curses, yavoyu le'achar shabo koidem lakol pratei habracha. They will only come after all the blessings, after all the details of the blessings come upon you. Then will come the curse. Umiteva bnei adam. In the nature of a person, shedavra loy toiv haba aleim le'achar shekod midavar toiv, az nirgash ubolet chesene she'aloy toiv harbe yoser. That when something bad comes on a person, when something bad befalls on a person, after they've experienced the good, after they've experienced the comfort of the blessing, then it has a much, much greater impact. And you kind of feel it. You miss the good on an even greater level. Heim bekamus v'heim be'echus, both in quantity and in quality. And the Rebbe brings an example, an obvious example. And it's known, a rich person who chas v'sholem, his fortune turned, became, the galgal, that wheel that turns. His fortune, unfortunately, he met misfortune. V'nasa ani, and he becomes poor. Hare tzare godel pi kama mimishu ani me'idai. Then his pain is much greater, many times greater than one who was always poor, one who's accustomed to it. And by the way, this also has a ramification in Hilchas Tzedakah. Says the Rebbe, in addition to the fact that this is bepashtus, this is obvious, this is something that is self-understood, even to a ben chamish lemikra, hine muvan hu gam bepirush Rashi shelifnei parshazu. So the Rebbe says that this also can be understood from an explicit Rashi in a previous parsha. And the Rebbe goes in to explain as follows. The Rebbe, I'm going to say this orally, the rest of this chapter, the Rebbe says, that Rashi says on the pasuk, Dei machsoiri ashayach saloi. When the pasuk tells us about giving tzedakah, about helping the poor person, the pasuk says that you have to give him sufficient for his deficiency. And what does Rashi say? Says Rashi, you have to give him dei machsoira, you have to give him sufficient for him, but you're not in any way commanded to make him rich. What asher yechsar loy, that he is missing, the Torah says that he is deficient in. What does it mean he is missing, he's deficient in? Says Rashi, and he quotes from the Gemara, even, quote, a horse to ride on and a servant to run ahead of him to clear the way, to clear the path. Which is obviously something which is superfluous, a regular, ordinary person doesn't need. And here comes the question, this is where the Rebbe builds the logic. If we're not commanded, we're not obligated in terms of fulfilling a mitzvah of tzedakah to make him rich, quote unquote, then why should we be obligated to give him a horse to ride on and a servant to run ahead of him, which are not things that are necessary for one's basic needs or for one to earn a living. If you say you have to give him proper tools so he can get back on his feet, give him means so he can sustain himself, okay, I understand. But you're talking about something which is a luxury for most people. So how come the mitzvah of tzedakah and the Torah obligates us, as Rashi explains, to provide it for this person? Because he was once used to it. He was accustomed to it. In his heyday, when he was rich, when he had the means, this was the norm for him. This was his common, expectations, that this is what he had. He can afford it. Now that he fell on misfortune, he no longer has it. If you want to properly fulfill the mitzvah of tzedakah, because for him this is a necessity, even though for most people it's a luxury, you have to provide it for him. And from all this you can understand that also according to Pshutish Mikra, not only according to hashkafa, to drash, but according to Pshutish Mikra, if somebody was once rich, somebody tasted the good life, somebody had an abundance of blessing, and suddenly that was taken away from him, that has such a deep impact that it affects him to the depth of his heart and his soul. And therefore, first the bracha, then the klala. That is what is going to trigger such a deep level of tshuva. And that's what Moshe Rabbeinu is saying. We're in chapter 3 now. But according to this, we need to understand what needs to be understood. What is the pasuk trying to tell us? What is Hashem telling us here? That Hashem is going to make it so that every single yid is going to come to tshuva. That's what Moshe Rabbeinu is saying, that these things will come on you sooner or later. It's going to happen, and every single yid will come to tshuva. The question is, if that's the case, how could you be so sure, or how is Moshe saying that every single yid will surely come to tshuva when the curses fall upon him? Maybe this is a yid that never had a bracha. Maybe this is a yid that perhaps did not taste the good life yet. We just made the point that why is bracha and klala playing a role in the trigger and becoming the catalyst for the person's tshuva? Because first the blessing and then the curse, then in that case, the curse is so much more impactful. But who says he had blessings? Who says every single yid had blessings? Says the Rebbe, if we go back to Parshas Re'eh and we read the words carefully, we'll see that every single yid has blessings. How so? Over there it says, Re'eh anoichi noisin lefneichem hayoim brocha l'klala. Hashem says, see, I give before you today blessings and cursings. And then he says, the blessing, asher tishmu. The blessing is that you will listen. And Rashi explains, what does it mean, asher? Asher can have different meanings. He explains that it means almenas. It's like saying, I'm giving you the blessing on condition that you listen to Hashem. And then he continues and he says, the curses will come if you don't listen. And the Rebbe says, here is the distinction. In just plainly reading the psukim, we may not pay attention to it. But if you look at the change, it's not just a slight nuance. It's a fundamental difference. To say to someone, I'm giving you the blessing on condition you do it means, I'm first giving you the blessing, but I'm giving it to you on condition that you do such and such. The curse is going to come, however, only if you do not listen. In other words, the blessing doesn't have to be preempted by anything. Hashem gives us the blessing. And this is telling us that Hashem gives the blessing to each and every yid with an expectation that he wants us to follow the Torah and mitzvahs. However, when do the curses come? Chas v'sholem. Only if it is preempted, it's prefaced by not following Hashem's ways. And according to this, it comes out, says the Rebbe, that there is absolutely no yid that did not receive blessing. Even somebody who sinned, even somebody who chas v'sholem is at a point that Hashem has, so to speak, no choice and needs to pour curses on him in order to bring him back home, that yid certainly experienced brachas. Unfortunately, he didn't keep to his part of the deal. He did not use the blessings for the condition that it was given him for, but certainly it was given to him. And therefore, it comes out that what our parsha is saying is very practical and is actually something that happens and that will happen. That's what Moshe says. If you do not follow in Hashem's ways, chas v'sholem, then what's going to happen? The curses will come. But remember that these curses are already preempted by the blessings, and therefore it's going to be such a great curse, so deep, it's going to have such an impact, so crushing, that it's going to certainly bring each and every yid to do a complete tshuva on the highest level, namely, b'chol levavcha v'chol nafshecha, with your whole heart and with your whole soul. And says the Rebbe that this is something that we see an extraordinary thing. Meaning, especially as we're approaching Rosh Hashanah, the Rebbe doesn't clearly mention here, explicitly mention here, but we know that Nitzavim is always read before Rosh Hashanah. It's a preparation for Rosh Hashanah. So he's saying Hashem promises to give, and the Rebbe stresses the word to each and every single year the blessings. It's just with one stipulation, on condition that you would do what Hashem wants. And what is the reason for this? Because every single Yid is considered to be a prince, b'nei melachim. This is inferred in halacha in Gemara Shabbos. In the Mishnah there it says that the princes can wear certain ornaments, and it's considered a garment for them. They can wear it on Shabbos. It's not considered carrying. And the Gemara says, who are these princes? And the Gemara says, the Yid, never Yid's a prince. And moreover, in Mishnah Brachas, where it says over there that till where we say Shema, and it says, you say Shema until the third hour in the day. Why? Rabbi Shua says, because that's the time that kings get up. The truth is there are two different girsois, two different versions, whether princes or kings. But over there, the way the Gemara has it in our Shas, it says kings. Who are these kings? For one or two kings, we're going to make a whole change in halacha? No, it's referring to each and every Yid. We're mamlechas koyanim. We're a whole nation of kings. And also the Rebbe brings even another halacha which we find in Gemara Bava Metzia, that if one hires workers and doesn't clearly stipulate with them what he's going to provide them for lunch or dinner, whatever he has to do. In those days it was common that when you had an employee, you also provided their meals. If he doesn't clearly stipulate with them, meaning he just leaves it hanging, he just goes by the norm, then no matter what he serves them, and the expression there is even kisuda shleima b'shaita, even like the meals of shleima, the feasts of shleima in his day, in his heyday, it's also not enough. Why? Because these are kings. These are children of kings. They deserve more than anything you can ever give them, and therefore you've never fulfilled your full obligation, and therefore you have to stipulate. Says the Rebbe, and it's certain, as we approach Rosh Hashanah, it's certain that each and every Yid will certainly fulfill the condition on which the blessings are given to us. However, here comes the question. If each and every single Yid is going to fulfill the conditions, and therefore we're never going to have to chas v'sholem receive the curses, because Hashem doesn't need to resort to the curses because we are fulfilling the condition, how will we ever come to a point of doing that ultimate level of tshuva? The whole purpose is to reach such a high level of tshuva. The ultimate tshuva, b'chol abav chol nafshecha. Says the Rebbe that there is another idea of tshuva, an even greater one. Not tshuva on sins, but rather tshuva on returning oneself, like it says, v'aruach toshav v'elokim asher nesano, to return the spirit, to return the soul to its rightful place. That's a higher level. It's called Tshuva Ilah, a higher level of Tshuva. And that is done through Simcha, not through being crushed, and not through bitterness, and not through depression, and not through sadness. This is a Simcha, it's a great joy of coming home, of coming higher to a home, to a higher level of godliness. And says the Rebbe, especially this year, and it happens to be that this year, as we're learning the Sicha, it is the same Kviyas as that year. This year, when it falls out on Shabbos itself, the letters of Shabbos is Oisiyas Tashuv, to return. That there's already a higher level of returning, but what kind of returning is it? A returning that's done with Menuchas HaNefesh, with peacefulness, with calmness, with rest, without any worries, without any connection even to the gashmias, into the negativity, to things that are perhaps can be chas v'sholom, an opposite or a detriment to kedusha. And that is the conclusion of the Sicha, that the blessing is what we certainly all get, and we need to make sure that that's where it stops.